Julian's hand, with its neatly trimmed nails and the faint scent of old paper, hovered an inch from the polished oak door of the hotel suite. He was about to knock when a voice, sharp and laced with a venomous cocktail of contempt and irritation, sliced through the wood. The speaker questioned who in their right mind would want to be shackled to a beta, a man a full 8 years his senior. The disdain was palpable, a physical thing that made the air in the hallway feel thin. It was followed by an older, more placating tone, undoubtedly belonging to the man's father. He was reminded of his duty, that with the intended partner having vanished, marrying Julian Thorne was the only option. The older man spoke of Julian's character, his respectable position as a university professor, and a quiet temperament that was, in its own way, as desirable as any Omega's. He urged his son to show some courtesy when they met. Beside Julian, his father and uncle shifted their weight, the fabric of their expensive suits rustling in the suddenly suffocating silence. Their embarrassment was a heavy cloak in the corridor. Julian, however, merely offered a serene, almost imperceptible smile. He adjusted the wire-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose, a familiar, steadying gesture. Then, with a composure that betrayed none of the words he'd just absorbed, he rapped his knuckles against the door. The door swung open to reveal the two men, a father and son duo from the powerful Sterling family. Surprise flickered across their features. Julian greeted the elder Mr. Sterling with a warm, practiced pleasantness, remarking that it had been too long. The awkward moment was glossed over with a flurry of polite greetings, a collective pretense that nothing had been overheard. Mr. Sterling formally introduced his son, Caleb. Julian was asked to please look after him. His gaze drifted slowly to the man he was meant to marry. Caleb Sterling, at 24, was a formidable presence. He stood well over 6 feet, a frame built for boardrooms and rugby fields, wrapped in a pinstripe business suit over a severe black shirt. There was a raw power coiled in his muscles, an impeccable, almost brutal beauty to his chiseled features. He was the very picture of an S-class alpha, radiating a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Julian understood perfectly why such a man would look down on an older beta like himself. The insult he'd heard moments ago was not a surprise, merely a confirmation. He let none of this show. His expression remained one of gentle warmth as he extended a hand. He told Caleb it was a pleasure to meet him. Caleb seemed momentarily taken aback by the lack of reaction, his lips thinning into a firm line before he took Julian's hand in a brief, crushing grip. A few days later, they were legally married, the ceremony a lavish affair in Newport that was meant for Julian's nephew, Leo. But Leo had fled, chasing some vague artistic dream in the city, leaving behind a social and financial alliance on the brink of collapse. With the news of the union already circulating through their elite circles, the wedding had to proceed. For the sake of the family's reputation, Julian's grandfather had personally requested that he step in. He was, after all, the only unmarried adult left in the Thorne family. After the reception, in the sterile silence of their wedding suite overlooking the Atlantic, Caleb produced a document in duplicate. He had informed Julian with the cold efficiency of a corporate takeover that this arrangement was temporary. He made it clear that Julian was not his type and that the moment Leo returned, this sham would be dissolved. He laid out his terms: no attempts at feigned intimacy and absolutely no interference in his private affairs. Julian had found himself in complete agreement, stating that marriage was not his original desire either and that their consensus was for the best. The agreement was simple. Upon Leo's return, Julian would unconditionally sign the divorce papers. Caleb, in turn, would provide substantial financial compensation. Caleb had nodded, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes, appreciating the straightforward, businesslike nature of the exchange. He signed his name with a decisive slash of ink, pressed a thumbprint beside it, and then pushed one copy across the table. Julian could keep it, he'd said, before turning and leaving the suite without a backward glance. 2 years later, Julian drifted up from the depths of sleep, a prickly sensation tickling his lips and cheek. He forced his heavy eyelids open to find Caleb's handsome face inches from his own, the dark stubble of his jaw scraping playfully against Julian's skin. One of Caleb's hands had found its way under his pajama shirt, kneading gently at his side. Caleb had murmured for him to get up, that he'd made breakfast. Julian impatiently pushed the hand away and rolled over, craving more sleep. A wicked chuckle rumbled in Caleb's chest. He asked if perhaps Julian needed a little more stimulation to get his day started. Julian stared blankly at the wall, pleading for just a little more time, explaining that he had been up late every night for a week grading midterm papers. Caleb was relentless, reminding Julian that he'd barely paid him any attention for days and had promised to go with him to the races today. He threatened to pull off his pajama bottoms if he didn't get up. Julian quickly clamped a hand over Caleb's, which was already tugging at his waistband. He relented, agreeing to get up if Caleb would just let go. Caleb's teeth grazed his earlobe, a warm puff of air following as he whispered a promise that Julian would have to make it up to him that night. Half dragged, half carried to the bathroom, Julian found the toothbrush already loaded with paste, the mouthwash cap filled. Caleb told him to hurry so he could go reheat the pancakes, then disappeared toward the kitchen. Standing before the mirror, Julian brushed his teeth in a daze, his mind drifting over the past 2 years. The initial animosity between them seemed like a lifetime ago. He couldn't pinpoint exactly when the disgust had melted into this comfortable, startling intimacy. It had all started about 1.5 years ago. They had attended Caleb's grandfather's 70th birthday party in the Hamptons. The combination of alcohol and the sheer number of omegas present had triggered a powerful rut in Caleb. Later that night, he had pinned Julian down, raw instinct overriding everything else. For 2 days and a night, Julian was trapped, too sore and exhausted to even leave the bed. When Caleb's senses returned, he had been entirely unapologetic, remarking with a lingering satisfaction that he hadn't expected being with Julian to feel so good. Julian, a pragmatist to his core and aware they were legally married, saw no point in crying foul. He had simply admitted defeat. He had calmly told Caleb that it had been an accident and should not be repeated. Caleb, however, had seemed to take that as a challenge. A few days later, he had tried to initiate things again. Julian had confronted him, asking what happened to him not being his type, to not wanting a real marriage. Caleb's response had been that of a shameless rogue. He'd said it felt good, and that was all that mattered. He essentially proposed they become lovers with no strings attached. Julian found the entire situation absurd. As a beta, his own libido was a quiet, manageable thing. He couldn't comprehend the primal, thought-derailing urges of an alpha like Caleb. But no matter how much he refused, Caleb was persistent, a relentless force of nature, and eventually Julian had stopped fighting. He lived by a philosophy of least resistance, and after a few more encounters, he had to admit there was an intoxicating quality to their physical connection. He had little left to lose. So, with a sort of weary acceptance, he moved into the Boston brownstone the Sterling family had prepared for them, and they settled into a rhythm. Their physical compatibility bled into other areas of their lives. They started spending more time together, and in the latter half of that first year, they began to truly know one another. Julian, an archaeology professor, kept his home filled with priceless artifacts and ancient texts, and thus never hired a housekeeper, preferring to do the cleaning himself on weekends. He often ate his meals at the university, a habit that had left him with a delicate stomach. When Caleb learned of this, he taught himself to cook, mastering complex soups and learning all of Julian's favorite dishes. Julian had been surprised that a man of Caleb's background even knew his way around a kitchen. Caleb had explained with a certain pride that the chefs he'd hired while studying abroad in London were all terrible, so he'd learned to cook for himself to impress a particularly discerning Omega. Caleb introduced Julian to his world of thrilling extravagance, spontaneous trips to go skiing in Vermont or watch the aurora borealis from a private jet over Maine. In return, Caleb made an effort to engage with Julian's quieter passions. He would patiently accompany Julian through museum exhibits, watch old noir suspense films, and even tried his hand at a pottery class. Mornings began with Caleb returning from a run to make breakfast and wake Julian up. They were bed partners, yes, but their daily life was indistinguishable from that of any deeply devoted couple. Yet, the agreement always lingered in the back of Julian's mind, a constant reminder not to let himself get swept away, not to mistake this comfortable arrangement for love. After breakfast, they drove to a racetrack in Connecticut. Caleb had once been a semi-professional motorcycle racer with his own team that had ended after a nasty crash left him with a broken leg. Julian had taken leave from the university to care for him. After a week of being confined to bed, Caleb had wrapped his arms around Julian's waist, whining like a child. He begged, claiming he was so bored he might die. Julian had coolly told him to stay put. It took a month for him to fully recover, after which he had disbanded the team. Now he only came to watch. They settled into the VIP seats, the roar of the engines a physical vibration in the air. Julian had no real interest in such extreme sports and found himself yawning. Caleb, however, was engrossed, his fingers laced tightly with Julian's. With his free hand, Julian idly scrolled through his phone when a new message popped up from his cousin. "Bro, they found Leo." Julian's pupils contracted. The world seemed to shrink to the size of his phone screen. He subconsciously glanced at Caleb, who was still fixated on the race. He gently withdrew his hand. Caleb turned to him, asking what was wrong. Julian mumbled an excuse about needing the restroom. Caleb started to get up, offering to go with him. Julian quickly waved him off, insisting he knew the way and that Caleb should watch the end of the race, which was entering its final lap. Caleb acquiesced, settling back into his seat. Julian walked quickly until he found a quiet corner, his heart hammering against his ribs. He called his cousin. He asked where Leo was. His cousin explained that Leo's dream of becoming a singer in Nashville had ended with him being conned out of his money and reduced to playing in a dive bar. Their father had sent people to find him and was on his way to bring him back personally. He would likely be home today. Julian was stunned. His cousin went on, saying what a mess Leo had made, forcing Julian, a confirmed bachelor, into this situation with the Sterlings. Julian's ears were ringing, the words blurring together. He thanked his cousin and hung up. A massive roar erupted from the stands. The race was over. Julian felt his own heart sinking. Leo's return meant the contract would be executed. He had always known this day would come, so why did he feel so hollow, so utterly bereft? Lost in thought, he was walking back when he heard the sound of quiet sobbing from around a corner. He paused, peering around the edge of the wall. A handsome alpha in a racing suit was facing a slender beta, whose shoulders shook with silent cries. Julian recognized them. The alpha was Rick, a well-known racer. He and his beta boyfriend had once approached Julian and Caleb at a race, saying they looked up to them as an example of a successful alpha-beta pairing. Rick was speaking in a helpless tone, explaining that his family had always opposed their relationship. His father had given him an ultimatum. If the beta could conceive a child, he would consider allowing the marriage. But after 3 years, there was still nothing. The beta's voice was hoarse with unshed tears as he reminded Rick that he had once sworn he only loved him and didn't care about heirs. That was then. Rick had replied things were different now. Just as Julian, feeling like an intruder, was about to retreat, a pretty Omega ran up, calling Rick honey and linking her arm through his. She glared at the beta, asking why he was still bothering Rick. Her voice was sharp with disdain. She demanded to know if she had to spell things out for him. The beta looked blankly from the Omega to Rick. Rick had the grace to look ashamed. The Omega declared her sovereignty with a triumphant air, announcing that she was Rick's fiancée and that their parents had already met. She told the beta to have some self-respect, sneering at the very idea of a beta who couldn't have children wanting to marry an alpha. She asked if he wanted to ruin Rick's entire family line. The beta stumbled back as if struck, covering his mouth before turning and fleeing. Rick watched him go, a conflicted look on his face, but made no move to follow. Julian remained frozen in place long after they had all gone. The scene was a horrifying reflection of his own situation with Caleb and Leo. It seemed that, in the eyes of the world, an alpha-beta love was an act of sabotage, a beta a genetic dead end. He took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose with a bitter smile. Taking a deep breath, he schooled his features back into a neutral mask and returned to his seat. Caleb was jubilant, telling him the team he'd been rooting for had won. Julian managed a smile, telling him that was great. Caleb wrapped an arm around him, asking if he still wanted to visit the museum. He'd heard there was a new exhibit. Julian shook his head, claiming he was too tired. He complained that he used to be able to pull all-nighters without a problem, but now a few late nights left him exhausted. He was getting old. Caleb suggested they go to his favorite private restaurant in the North End for a good meal. The place was small and quiet, run by a charming, beautiful Omega. The owner came to serve them himself, and Julian noticed his slightly rounded belly. He urged the man to rest, saying they were regulars and could manage. The owner smiled shyly, explaining that it was their third child and he was used to it. As he walked away, Julian watched him thoughtfully. Caleb placed a piece of pan-seared scallop on his plate, noticing he hadn't touched his food. He asked what was wrong. Julian looked at him. Caleb was 26, in his prime, the eldest son of a powerful family. It was inconceivable that the Sterlings wouldn't want an heir. Julian asked, his tone deliberately casual, if it was true that Omegas were just naturally prone to pregnancy. Caleb propped his chin on his hand, a teasing glint in his eye. He asked if Julian was envious, offering to work harder tonight. Julian laughed, a hollow sound. He told him not to waste his energy, that he was just a beta. Caleb insisted that it didn't matter, that if it was meant to be, it would happen. Then he added, more thoughtfully, that with the frequency of their activities, an Omega would have been pregnant long ago. Julian raised an eyebrow, his smile self-deprecating. It was a pity he wasn't an Omega. While beta pregnancy wasn't impossible, the chances were infinitesimally small. He knew a miracle like the one Rick and his ex-boyfriend had hoped for wouldn't be granted to everyone. Caleb, oblivious to the turmoil in Julian's mind, just urged him to eat before the food got cold. Julian picked at his food, the taste like ash in his mouth. He had made his decision. The dream was over. It was time to wake up. That night, when Caleb reached for him, Julian responded with an uncharacteristic fervor. It would be the last time. The next day, Caleb had a golf game with some business partners. He'd asked Julian to join him, but Julian had claimed exhaustion from the night before and begged off. An hour after Caleb left, the moving company arrived. It took them less than 2 hours to pack all of Julian's belongings. He retrieved the agreement from the safe. Caleb's bold signature and the stark red of his thumbprint seemed to erase any lingering reluctance in his heart. He had been so decisive then. Julian could be no less decisive now. He signed his name, pressed his own thumbprint below Caleb's, and left the document on the desk in Caleb's study. He slipped the platinum wedding band from his finger and placed it on top of the paper. He wondered what Caleb's reaction would be when he returned to an empty house. Would he feel a pang of loss, or just annoyance? Julian shook his head at his own foolishness. Caleb had always preferred sweet, pliable omegas. He had only accepted Julian out of convenience. He had to admit he'd been drawn to Caleb, had even allowed himself the fantasy that Caleb felt something more than just physical desire. But the reality was stark. He was older, a beta, an obstacle to the continuation of the Sterling line. Their marriage was a stopgap. With Leo, the rightful partner, back in the picture, it was time for him to step aside. He sent an email to the university dean, requesting to take all of his accumulated sabbatical leave, effective immediately. At 3 in the afternoon, a message from Caleb appeared on his phone. "Honey, should I pick up dinner or are you cooking tonight?" The word honey was a dazzling, painful little lie. From now on, Caleb's honey would be Leo. He replied coolly, telling Caleb to eat with his friends and not to rush back. When Caleb asked if he would be bored at home alone, Julian didn't answer. He swapped out his phone's SIM card, sent a brief, vague text to his family about traveling for a while, and drove away. His plan was to visit a series of unlisted historical sites in rural Pennsylvania, a way to immerse himself in research and mend his heart. After driving all day, he checked into a nondescript motel. That night, his father called. He demanded to know why Julian hadn't told Caleb he was traveling. Julian asked what was wrong. His father's voice was strained. He said Caleb was searching everywhere for him, acting like a madman, and wanted to know what had happened between them. Julian rubbed his temples. He asked if his father had heard that Leo was back. His father confirmed it but didn't see the connection. Julian stated, his voice devoid of emotion, that his father should tell Caleb that with Leo's return, their agreement was now in effect. He would understand. His father, confused, asked what agreement he was talking about and pleaded with him to call Caleb himself. Julian, claiming exhaustion from the drive, ended the call and switched off his phone. The next day, he met up with a former graduate student, a beta named Kevin. Kevin ran a private historical preservation firm and had free time. Hearing of Julian's plans, he had enthusiastically offered to join him. They hired a local guide to take them to a secluded historic village deep in the mountains. The guide, a handsome young alpha named Alex, greeted Julian with a bright smile and a warm handshake. The village was inaccessible by car. As they hiked the rugged trail, Alex was attentive, constantly turning back to offer Julian a hand over difficult terrain. Kevin teased him, asking why he was only helping Julian. Alex's dark features flushed slightly as he offered Kevin his hand as well, but Kevin just laughed it off, saying he was used to roughing it and that Alex should focus on Julian, who was clearly less accustomed to it. The village was like stepping back in time. There was no cell service. Julian spent the day completely absorbed, taking photographs and notes. Back in town that evening, Julian found he had no appetite. He'd been feeling bloated and nauseous for the past couple of days. He forced down some soup, but his stomach churned. While he was picking at his food, his phone, now reconnected to the network, rang with an unknown number. He answered. Caleb's voice, frantic and furious, exploded from the receiver, demanding to know where he was. Julian moved away from the table, calmly explaining that the signal had been poor. He asked what was the matter. Caleb fired back a barrage of questions, wanting to know why he had left so suddenly without a word. Julian, wondering if Caleb had truly forgotten, stated plainly that Leo was back and, as per their agreement, their marriage was over. He informed Caleb that he had already engaged a lawyer to handle the paperwork. There was a stunned silence on the other end, followed by an enraged roar. He demanded to know what Julian was talking about, shouting that he couldn't just divorce him. Julian held the phone away from his ear until the yelling subsided. He then continued in a measured tone, reminding Caleb that he was the one who had drafted the agreement, the one who had signed it first. He asked if Caleb had forgotten. Caleb stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Julian pressed on, coolly requesting that the promised financial compensation be arranged as soon as possible. He was about to hang up when Caleb called again. Julian answered, annoyed. Caleb's tone had shifted completely. He asked, his voice softer, if he had done something to make Julian angry. Julian patiently explained that he wasn't angry and that Caleb had done nothing wrong. He was simply fulfilling their promise. He also requested that Caleb stop calling him his husband, as that title now belonged to Leo. At that moment, Kevin came over, asking about their plans for the next day. He noticed Julian was on the phone and fell silent. But it was too late. Caleb heard his voice and his fury returned. He demanded to know who Julian was with. Julian began to explain it was his former student, then stopped himself. He didn't owe Caleb an explanation. His tone hardened as he stated that it was a private matter and none of Caleb's business. There was a long, dangerous pause before Caleb spoke his name, Julian Thorne, his voice tight with suppressed violence. He swore that if Julian dared to cuckold him, he would never let him go. Julian hung up the phone, his resolve hardening into a cold, protective shell. The next morning, a loud, insistent banging on his hotel room door woke him. He had overslept. The knocking continued, accompanied by Kevin's anxious calls. Julian stumbled out of bed, a wave of dizziness washing over him. He gripped the nightstand until it passed, wondering if his blood sugar was low. He put on his glasses and opened the door to find Kevin looking panicked. And behind him, his heart stopped. It was Caleb. He looked terrible. His hair was a mess, his eyes were bloodshot, and a dark stubble covered his jaw. Before Julian could speak, Caleb pushed past Kevin, strode into the room, and slammed the door, the lock clicking shut behind him. His eyes, burning with a desperate fire, locked onto Julian. "Come back with me," he said, his voice a low growl. Julian walked to the small table and poured a glass of water, his hand steady despite the tremor in his chest. He repeated what he had said on the phone. Caleb crossed the room in 2 long strides, grabbing Julian's shoulders and spinning him around. He insisted the agreement was from 2 years ago, that it didn't count anymore. Julian tried to shrug him off, a helpless smile touching his lips. He reminded Caleb that as a businessman, he should understand the sanctity of a contract. "To hell with the contract," Caleb snarled. "You're not leaving me. You married me, and you'll be my husband for the rest of your life." The raw possession in his voice was staggering, but it wasn't enough. Julian remained unmoved. He stated that Caleb couldn't just dismiss a 2-year-old promise, and that feelings change. Caleb insisted his wouldn't, that he'd never felt this way about anyone else. Julian looked at him, his expression calm but his heart aching. He told Caleb he was 34 years old, not some naive youth. He had seen enough of the world to know that marriage, in the end, was sustained by more than just fleeting feelings. It was about legacy, about heirs. Caleb looked stunned, asking if Julian thought he was incapable of commitment. Julian didn't answer directly. He pulled away, his voice rising for the first time. He was a beta with a low chance of conception. He said that even if Caleb didn't marry Leo, there would be a line of omegas for him to choose from. He insisted that their marriage had been wrong from the beginning. Caleb's voice was ragged with emotion. "It's not wrong. I don't care about any of that. All I want is you." Julian thought of Rick at the racetrack, of his initial promises defeated by familial pressure and biological reality. "People change," he said, his own voice cracking slightly. "It's better to end this now, cleanly, than to let it fester into something ugly." Caleb's hands clenched into fists. "So that's it? You're determined to leave?" "I'm just following your original plan," Julian began. But before he could finish, Caleb lunged, sweeping him off his feet and throwing him over his shoulder. "What are you doing?" "Put me down," Julian yelled, struggling against his grip. "Since you won't be reasonable," Caleb grunted, "I'll carry you back." He threw open the door and strode out, ignoring Kevin's shocked expression. Kevin ran to block his path, pleading with him to calm down. Caleb brushed him aside, saying it was a family matter and that outsiders should stay out of it. Julian continued to struggle, his glasses falling to the floor. As Caleb neared the stairwell, a dark shape appeared and, with a sickening thud, a fist connected with Caleb's jaw. Caleb staggered, setting Julian down. Before Julian could even find his footing, Caleb pushed him behind him and lunged at the newcomer. It was Alex, the tour guide. The two alphas began trading blows in the narrow hallway, a whirlwind of raw, unrestrained aggression. Hotel staff rushed to the scene, shouting for them to stop. Eventually, they were pulled apart. Caleb grabbed Julian, pulling him possessively into his arms, and glared at Alex. He demanded to know if this was another one of Julian's former students. Alex, panting, glared back. Julian, caught in the middle, explained through gritted teeth that he was their guide and demanded that Caleb stop making a scene. Back in the room, the silence was heavy and thick with unspoken words. Caleb's face was bruised, and there were scrapes on his knuckles. Julian, unable to simply leave him like that, retrieved the first aid kit from his bag. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed while Julian leaned over him, dabbing his cuts with an antiseptic-soaked cotton swab. Suddenly, Caleb's arms shot out, wrapping around Julian's waist and pulling him down onto his lap, straddling him. Julian glared at him, asking if he could possibly behave himself. Caleb looked up at him, a flicker of his old arrogance in his eyes. He said matter-of-factly that this position was better. Julian wouldn't have to strain his back leaning over. And then, as Julian was still processing the sheer audacity of the man, Caleb lowered his head and pressed a soft, possessive kiss to the side of his neck.